Now, former Chief of Staff to John Howard from Barton Deakin, Grahame Morris, and also the veteran Labor campaigner and strategist Bruce Hawker. Bruce, first to you. We'll get to the youth unemployment issue in a moment because it is a very important one. But on the response to the Manus Island unrest, what have you made of that debate? Has the fact that Labor, and in fact you saw it very closely when Kevin Rudd set up the PNG plan, it was Labor's work in the first place?
Well, a few things come out of this. One is, if you are the relevant minister, you have to have a real hands-on approach to that. Tony Burke certainly did when we were in government and the Manus Island agreement was being negotiated with the PNG government, and subsequently he was spending a lot of time there talking to them. Richard Miles was doing the same sort of thing. And if you have that hands-on connection, then you can make some assessments and judgments for yourself, not necessarily always having to rely on other people for their views about things. So I think that's what I'd say in the first respect, that Labor was very, very hands-on with Manus Island. Morrison, by contrast, seems to have been heavily reliant on other people to give him advice about this thing, and I think has really gone out of his way to build a story which has been found to be completely unfounded.
But what else does a minister do? The Labor ministers that you referred to, the former ministers, they would hardly have been there to see for themselves.
Well,
you've got to take advice.
Yeah, sometimes they were, but you do need to take advice. But then I think a really very important question that has to be answered is, well, when did the minister find out that what he'd been told was wrong? What steps did he take to correct the record immediately? Because even 2 days later he was talking about people wanting to take, guaranteeing that people who took refuge inside the asylum, inside the compound, weren't going to be molested. Well, that wasn't the case at all. So I think he's got a bit to answer for here, and it's good that that there is going to be an inquiry to look more closely.
Well, let's go to Grahame Morris now. You've heard what Bruce has had to say. Grahame, the minister's defence in the Parliament is that he's been upfront and held 5 or so news conferences in the last week to provide updates, and information isn't always correct when you do so quickly.
Yeah, look, the minister has done everything he's obliged to do. He was out there saying, look, on the information I've got, this is what happened. And then some of that was a bit fluffy. And he went back to the media and to the community and he said, hey, we're not sure. And remember, the very next morning after this disturbance, riot, whatever you want to call it, the local Papua New Guinea Member of Parliament was saying, oh look, nothing much happened, a few scratches, nobody broke out, nobody was hurt. So it really was quite confusing. But what is all of this about? And it seems to me that, if there is a riot, somebody's going to get hurt. And I reckon the electorate, rather than worrying about whether or not Scott Morrison told what was happening in this hour or the next hour or the hour after that, I think most people are saying, look, these people who started the riots should have a big cross through them and they should be sent home straight away and marked never to come to Australia. Those who assisted them and were involved should have a red mark a black mark on their name and saying probably not to Australia, and those who weren't involved probably ought to go to the front of the queue to get processed. These sort of people who want to have a fight first and a riot first are not the sort of people we want to come to Australia.
Bruce, I suppose, you can respond to that.
Well, that's assumption. On assumption, we don't know what's happened there, that these blokes have started a riot. What we do know is that they were attacked from within the compound, and at least one person has been killed and others have been injured rather badly. So you can't assume any of those things. What we do know from some reports is that people who had absolutely no involvement in any altercations were seeking refuge in their cells, were dragged out, assaulted, beaten up,
Okay, well, I'll go to Grahame on that because I do think that that's a valid question. But the point I'd put to you is, Bruce, isn't this a problem of people in limbo, of this uncertainty over them, that was inherent in the policy that Labor had put in place? So this could have easily happened under the Labor government.
Well, there are refugees sitting around the world waiting to be relocated. That's the truth.
But this is a situation where people have got close to
more
Australia and taken back. They're clearly angry.
Absolutely.
This could have happened under Labor.
This could have happened anywhere in the world, but as I said earlier, if you have the right processes in place, if you have the right people overseeing it, if you have the right intelligence being given back to the Australian officials, which clearly was not happening here, you might be in a better position to make some judgments about how things are going and what level of cooperation.
Well, isn't it too early, Graham, to be making judgments as to blame here, given that, as Mr Morrison has said, he doesn't even know the full facts. He wants to get to the bottom of it. He said so in Parliament this afternoon.
Well, I understand that, and that's why we're having a review, and that's fine. But you know, clearly the asylum seekers have been involved in a riot. Now, you know, there's a million ways of expressing yourself that you're not happy about something without running amok in the centre and escaping. And where did they think they were going? You know, Manus Island is an island. But you know, I listened to Bruce.
Some of them weren't going
there.
anywhere. That's the point. People came from outside in and assaulted them. That's beyond argument now. So that's the sort of question that has to be answered. So before you start saying they're out there starting riots all over the place, I think this inquiry's actually got to come to some conclusions about that. You can't make that decision. You can't make that conclusion on the basis of the information that's available at the moment. We just can't do it.
Well, yeah. It's obvious that we haven't got some little innocent angels there who did everything right. They didn't. And you know, I think most Australians ought to say that these are not the sort of people, if they're involved in this, that we want in this country. And Bruce, the whole thing started because you had two wimpy Labor Prime Ministers who undid all the... John Howard, Amanda Vanstone, Phil Ruddock, they had the boat people beaten. And all of a sudden your Prime Ministers undid everything and now we've got to fix the bloody thing again.
Well, you don't fix it by going around slashing people who are hiding in their cells. And that's the hard reality that we're dealing with now. And we're also dealing with a lot of misinformation that was being spread by the relevant minister to the Australian public over what actually happened there. I think it's going to be very welcome to hear what happens in this inquiry, and I hope it's very open and we get a full report on it, not like these other secretive things that go on around so-called border protection with this government on a constant basis.
Gentlemen, we've got to go to a break. Bruce, Graham, stay where you are. We'll be back in just a moment. Speaking with me, Bruce Hawker and Grahame Morris. Graham, the other issue that dominated question time, understandably today, is the issue of jobs, given the latest announcements in the last week from the aluminium manufacturer Alcoa. Do you think the government, as a long-term strategist for the coalition and the Liberal Party, it's fine, the economic argument, but is the government doing enough to make it clear to the individuals concerned, whether it's in Geelong or wherever else, that they are aware of their plight, that they're showing that human concern?
Well, you can always do more, and I agree with you, Kieran, that tone of voice from the Prime Minister and various ministers is very, very important. Look, some of the ministers could do a bit better. I think Tony Abbott actually gets the tone quite right. Look, when these bigger organisations fall over, it makes headlines. But we forget that, you know, there are small businesses out there that would also like help. You know, and 80% of those don't survive. But you know, something always happens that picks up the slack. I come from Leeton, and we used to have a bigger factory than SPC, and it was called Leetona. And it fell over, and the government didn't prop it up. And all the farmers, including my family, you know, we all had to adjust. And Leeton's still there, and it's a thriving town. Things change, unfortunately, and you just cannot guarantee, particularly with all the extras we keep asking employers to pay, we just can't guarantee that all of these jobs are going to be there forever. They're not.
It seems to me that this whole issue the last couple of weeks has breathed new life into the government's campaign on the carbon tax. It's still a campaign because they're yet to repeal it, Bruce Hawker. Is this something that Labor just needs to now let through? Because it seems like Tony Abbott has a fair bit of a debate which is resonating once again for him on this very issue.
Well, that day is coming soon. I don't think there's going to be a change in Labor's stand on it now. I was one who actually felt that it was better to let the thing go through because we didn't actually fight the last election campaign on a carbon tax. We fought the campaign on an emissions trading scheme. However, I don't think that that's the real thing that's really focusing people's thinking now. I think it is much more around the structural sort of issues that are coming out about employment and big employers leaving Australia and big industries going, and what that actually means for just ordinary workers who do an honest day's work for an honest day's pay, and are now finding themselves on the scrap heap. And of course, we know now, we'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute, I think, that youth unemployment is becoming a very big issue. And these are the people who would have had the apprenticeships at Holden and at Toyota and all those ancillary employers, 20 to 50,000 on various estimates of businesses which are associated with those big manufacturers who are now going to go to the wall.
But isn't Grahame right, Bruce, in the sense that these things shift, that it's fluid, that the economy is always changing, and that an economy needs to be vibrant, and government needs to respond to it?
Well, I've got no doubt that the economies do change all the time, and we're going through various changes now. But that doesn't mean, in my view, that you just throw these people to the wall, because it'll create all sorts of other issues as well further down the line. Maybe it should have been a much more staged change, so that the government's actually working with other industries coming and take their place.
When you look at the automotive sector, it's not until 2017. It's still a few years.
Well, it's 3 years away. I mean, it's not really all that long off. In my view, I think it's a shame that we're heading into an Australia where we're manufacturing less and less, and people who had previously done really good day's work and were solid people, men and women and apprentices, won't have those sorts of jobs anymore.
Okay,
and that's a big issue socially and politically.
Grahame, Tony Nicholson was my guest a bit earlier, the Executive Director of the Brotherhood of St Lawrence, and there is a real problem there on youth unemployment. For some reason, it just simply, youth employment growth has not kept up with the rest of the employment market.
Yeah, but Kieran, young people are always, slightly more represented in the unemployment queues than older people. And it's just common sense. Where the Brotherhood is focusing, I think, is the wrong area. Yes, parts of northern northern Tasmania, country villages, country towns, the Northern Territory, they've got, 17, 18, 19, 20%.
And the gap's grown, Grahame, that's the point, though.
But if the average is 12, then there must be a lot of areas that are 5, 6, 7. And maybe we ought to be having a look at those areas with low youth unemployment to see what they're doing right, rather than worrying about, in villages, in country areas where it doesn't matter what you do. People are not going to go there to create jobs.
I want to turn finally, one more point.
Tony Nicholson did make the point that this isn't just in regional communities, this is in the cities as well. That's what's very disturbing about this. And, this is where government does have to play a role. There are times when they can wash their hands of it and say, this is not our responsibility, we shan't have to worry about this. But the truth is, if you are going to address those issues, government does have to play a role.
Well, the government's certainly looking to undertake some major reforms, tough decisions, as they've been making it clear. It seems to me, Bruce, you look at hockey's performance at the weekend with the G20 finance ministers meeting, a very effective effort, set the goal, is creating the narrative very well, as we like to put it in political commentary, ahead of his budget. Now, obviously, a lot's going to rest on the government's response to the Commission of Audit and the budget, but to me, so far, he's been doing a lot better than what the former government did in selling and creating an awareness of what the government of the day is doing on the economy.
Look, he's got a message there. The age of entitlement is over, is underpinning all this stuff, which is to say, we're going to come out there and we're going to cut and slash and you're going to be feeling the pain, but don't say we didn't tell you. And there might be a few things that we said we weren't going to do, we are going to do now.
But this is what economists have been saying for ages, that you've got to rein in the middle-class welfare. Surely that's got to happen sometime.
I agree that you do need to rein in middle-class welfare. That's why the government's hypocrisy in having this 22 $22 billion paid parental leave scheme, which is going to go to the wealthiest women to take 6 months off on full pay up to $150,000 a year, is so wrong. You can't be saying everyone's got to tighten their belts and stop doing these things when at the same time you're spending $22 billion over the next 4 years to give money to people who don't need it. Now that's where the opposition needs to just come in and say, look, it's all right to talk the talk, but you've got to walk the walk. And when you've got these glaring examples of hypocrisy on the part of the government, wrong priorities, then this government stands to be judged on that and stands to be accused of rank hypocrisy.
Grahame, what do you make of that point from Bruce? Because I know that there are a number of Liberals who actually agree with him on that point, that it undermines their broader economic case, which, as I said in my question to Bruce, I think is proving to be quite effectively establishing a good narrative and foundation for this first budget coming up.
Yeah, look, Joe Hockey added some energy and some grunt to the G20 people who were sort of some of the most unexcitable people in the world. And I'm getting it whether it's the boardrooms in Sydney or farmers at Yass or people at swimming on the weekend. They're saying, isn't Joe Hockey going well? But Bruce, when did you and the Labor Party start hating pregnant employees?
No, that's not the point, Grahame, and you know that's not the point.
What have you got against young mothers who are pregnant? Why aren't they? When did they become undeserving?
Labor actually did have a very fair paid parental leave scheme, which was a payment which went to everyone regardless of their income. This one doesn't. This goes to women on $150,000 and more a year, getting $75,000 for 6 months to stay at home and look after a baby. There are plenty of women out there who did it tough, who never had that opportunity, regardless of what their income was. This is middle class and upper middle class welfare at its worst.
Okay, Grahame, quickly, finally. We've got to go.
Crap.
Quickly, your response.
Crap.
Okay, that's
Crap.
quick. Good on you. I like pithy responses. Grahame Morris, Bruce Hawker, thanks, gents.
Thank you.
And a quick break on PM Agenda. I'll be back in just a moment.